Well, before we get started today, let's talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. Now, Jeff Farris is a hobbyist cabinet maker, and you might see him at woodworking shows around the country where he gives folks tips on sharpening their tools. Good morning, Jeff.
Morning, Norm.
Now, there sure are a lot of different ways to sharpen tools.
Lots. Right now I'm working on a diamond stone. We have some oil stones here. These are Japanese water stones, both flat and in a contoured shape to fit your gouges. And then we've got the old reliable, a high-speed dry grinder, which is great at removing a lot of material in a hurry.
Now, we've set these things up on our rolling shop cabinet. What recommendations do you have for our sharpening center?
Well, we want to be at a comfortable height. We don't want to be leaning over too far or reaching up to it, either one. We'd like to have a surface that isn't going to be bothered if it gets wet or oily.
So this laminate would be a good choice, and how's this height feel?
Laminate's great for our surface. The height is just about right.
Okay. How about storage?
Well, we're going to have a lot of jigs and fixtures, attachments, oil cans. We need a place to keep all these pieces and parts.
Okay. Now, this cart is on casters. Would you recommend that?
I don't think that's a good idea. Sometimes we're going to have to put some pressure against our tool. And even with locking casters, you can get some movement.
Now, there's one more thing I want to incorporate into our sharpening center, and that's this machinist vise, because we occasionally do some metalworking here in the shop. So I'm thinking that about 2 feet square might be just about right. Won't take up too much room in the shop, yet it gives me what I need.
I think it'll be perfect at 2 feet.
Okay, so what do you recommend for equipment?
Well, my problem with this tool is heat. As you present the tool to the dry grinder, it's very difficult not to generate too much heat at the edge of the tool, and then you draw the temper. So let's look at an alternative. This is a slow rotation, water-cooled grinding system.
Wow. So this is like the old treadle wheels that you used to see.
Exactly. You can still find them in the New England antique shops, but this one's got a motor, so you don't have to sit there and pedal it.
Well, let's see how it works.
Let's do that. Have you got a dull chisel around?
Well, we try to keep most of them sharp here in the workshop.
Well, we do have a problem because all of mine look like that too.
Yeah, this one doesn't need any work at all.
Well, let's fix that. We'll loan it to the neighbor. And of course, he'll use it for a screwdriver, drop it 7 or 8 times, and then we'll have a problem.
No, look what you... Oh, boy. Well, it certainly needs to be sharpened now.
No doubt. Well, let's take a look at how we're going to remove these nicks, reshape the bevel, and get that back to a perfect cutting edge. We'll put it in this holder, lock that down, then we'll slide the tool holder onto the tool support.
So it's a jig. It helps you hold the tool.
Exactly. We can't lose our angle, either right or left, and the bevel angle is controlled by the height.
So how are you going to set that angle?
Well, we've got a gauge that will give us the precise angle here. This can set anything between 15 degrees and 75. Of course, on our bench chisels, the standard is 25. We'll set that. Then we'll rest on 2 points of the circumference of the stone and adjust the tool support until the back of the chisel just matches the gauge.
Ah, that's a great little tool.
And there's our 25-degree angle.
Okay.
Now we're ready to start grinding.
Are there any tricks to holding the tool?
Not much. All we want to do is put a little bit of pressure up on the back of the handle, a little pressure down on the tool itself, and work side to side to keep the wear on the grindstone even.
Now, can you put too much pressure on the wheel?
Not really. Even if you put enough to pick it up, you simply can't hurt the tool or the grinder.
Can I give that a try?
Sure.
Well, it's been about a minute between the two of us. How do I know when it's complete?
Take a look, Norm. See if we still have any nicks.
No, I don't see any nicks.
Feel on the back side. You should have an even burr all the way across the edge of the tool.
That we have.
Then we're ready for the next step.
And what's that?
Well, if we looked at this under a magnifying glass, we'd see a lot of ridges in there. We need to refine the scratch pattern, make those ridges smaller and closer together.
So you put on a finer stone?
No, actually, we're going to use the same stone. This is called the stone grater. And with this, we're actually going to polish the surface of the grindstone. Feel that now.
Oh, that's much smoother than it was initially.
Yeah, now we can just go right back to exactly the same stone and refine our scratch pattern. And there we go.
Oh, look at that. Almost a mirror finish. I guess we're done.
Not quite. We still have the burr on the back side.
Oh yeah, I can feel that.
And we'd like to refine the scratch pattern on that bevel a bit more. We're going to do that on a leather strop.
So that's like the strop you see in the barbershop.
Exactly, except now it's got a motor on it.
And what was the compound you put on?
That's a 6,000 grit aluminum oxide honing compound.
Heavy-duty toothpaste.
Exactly. You get a real bright smile, but only for a few weeks. We're going to use that to remove the burr, and then we'll polish the bevel. We'll go back and forth from one side to the other 2 or 3 times, and that'll take care of it.
Mm-hmm. Wow, perfect. Nice shine and plenty sharp. Now, how about one of my plane irons?
Exactly the same setup, same jig, same procedure.
Mm-hmm. Now, turning tools seem to be difficult to do. Can you take care of the gouge?
Yeah, we can help you with this one. We want to work with the wheel turning away from the cutting edge now. So we're going to come over to this side, put our tool support so that the wheel's turning away from the cutting edge. Mm-hmm. Then our jig, we'll clamp our gouge up in the jig, match up the bevel angle that we had from before.
Mm-hmm. So here you don't use the gauge, you just match the existing
No, we're going to
bevel.
match the existing bevel. Then the flat surface on the front of the jig is going to keep the angle the same all the way around the sweep of the gouge.
Jeff, you're using a different honing wheel for the gouge.
Yeah, this one's specially contoured to fit the inside flute of your gouges.
Boy, this gouge has never been in better shape. It ought to improve my turning a little bit. But I got something I think is going to bring you to your knees. One of the kitchen knives.
No problem, Norm. This is the knife jig. We'll put the blade in just about parallel. Put it on the stone, measure our angle, and we're ready to go.
Okay. When do I tell them that I have 50 more where this one came from?
There we go.
Okay. All right.
Now here's the test.
Wow, just like a razor blade.
Absolutely.
Now here's the deal I'm ready to make. I'll buy you lunch, you finish sharpening the knives.
Sorry, Norm, this time tomorrow I've got to be in Tampa for a woodworking show.
Well, thanks for all your expertise.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that was an interesting session with Jeff Farris on sharpening. Now, for the last few minutes, I've been working on the parts for the base of our sharpening station. It's all going to be built out of 3/4-inch birch plywood. I've made a rabbet at the top, a rabbet in the middle, and one at the bottom for the fixed shelves. To cover up the plywood edges on the side panels, I'm going to put on some poplar strips that are cut 1/4 inch thick. Could be any wood that you happen to have around the shop. A little bit of glue and some brads will hold them in place. Now, between these fixed panels, there'll be some drawers. In order to attach the fixed panels to the sides, I'm going to cut some slots for some biscuits. Now we're ready for the final assembly. Some glue in the dado. Drop the shelf in. And then I'll secure it by toenailing some brads right through the shelf. Now this second shelf will provide a cavity right here for a pull-out step so that you can get up to a more comfortable height for some of the sharpening operations. We continue to get email asking about this gluing device. It meters just the right amount of glue into these biscuit slots. It's a handy tool to have around. All right, well, I'll let this sit overnight. Tomorrow we'll build the drawers, the top, and the pull-out step. In the meantime, I think I'll practice my knife sharpening skills. Well, I would have got a little more done last night before I left, but I spent too much time gathering all the chisels and knives from around the house that will sharpen when the station is finished. Now, I did come in this morning and remove the clamps and sanded all the joints smooth. I've added this top rail, and I've added a piece to cover this plywood edge down here. And I want to start today by building that pull-out step. It's basically going to be an upside-down box made out of more of the 3/4 inch birch plywood. All the joints will be rabbet joints, so I've set up the stacked dado and my sacrificial strip, and I'll just run the pieces through. Now I need a top for that step, and this is where my Yankee thrift kicks in. The only pieces of plywood left out of the sheet that I had were these two little pieces. So I'll just glue them together with some biscuits, and you'll never know. Here's the sides of the step, and all I do is put a little bit of glue and secure the joint with some brads. All right, now the top of the step just gets dropped into those rabbets with a little bit of glue. Now secure it with some brads, sand it up, and install it. Okay, that's great. Now on to some drawers. Now I'm starting to work on the drawer connection between the front, which will be 3/4 inch birch, and the sides, which are 1/2 inch plywood. I have a dovetail cut, a sliding dovetail in the drawer front, and then I have a tail formed on the side, which is what I just ran. The tail piece slides into the drawer front. It's a nice snug joint, and it's very strong. What I've done is set up a 1/2 inch dovetailing bit in the router, and I've adjusted it to make the tail piece. By running each side, I form the tail. The only thing I have to keep in mind as I run the piece through is to keep the piece tight to the table and tight to the fence. Take my time, and I'll get a perfect dovetail with each pass. I'm going to make that sliding dovetail in the drawer front. I have to push the fence back, and I carefully mark the table when I did the sample, so I know exactly where to set it, which is right there. Tighten that down, and I've now brought my miter gauge to the table because I'm going to use that to guide the piece through. I'll run into the dovetail bit until the back edge of the front comes to this line, and I know that that's where I want to stop it. See how that stops right at that point? That's exactly what I want. Now to make the slot at the other end of the drawer front, I have to come around to the other side. Reverse the miter gauge, and then put the piece in. And here it gets a little bit tricky. Because of the rotation of the bit, it's going to want to push the drawer front away from the fence. So I'm going to apply a fair amount of pressure towards the fence and go even slower as I go through to get a nice clean joint. Now I'm cutting the side pieces to length. The reason I waited till now was that if I ruined one of these dovetails running it through the router, I had plenty of material to do it again. Now I've set my dado to 1/2 inch width, and I've just made a groove in the back of the side piece where the back of the drawer will intersect. Now I've reduced the dado to 1/4 inch thickness. I'm going to run a groove in the side pieces and the back of the drawer box to receive a 1/4 inch plywood bottom. I can't make the groove in the drawer front for the plywood bottom with the dado because it would come through each of the ends. So I turn to my router with a 1/4 inch bit and a guide fence. Now for the assembly. A little bit of glue on the dovetail and in the slot, and this all fits together like a fine Swiss watch. Now for the 1/4 inch plywood bottom, and that just goes in dry, no glue. And we'll slip in the back piece, and secure it with some brads. Now I'm ready to install the drawer slides. I have these full extension slides. I've laid out the center line of the slide, and I like to use a couple sticks to help hold it in place while I attach it. That way I know it's square to the front. Bring it to my layout line on the front and drill a pilot hole for a couple screws. The corresponding piece of the slide gets attached to the side of the drawer. Okay, let's see how this works. Slide them together, push it in. Works great. A little bit of adjustment, 4 more to go. Okay, a couple holes in each drawer front for these wire pulls. But I won't install them now. I'll wait till after I put the finish on the piece. Okay, now I've tipped the cabinet up. You're looking at the underside. I made this little jig out of some hardwood so I could drill a nice straight 3/8" diameter hole into the cabinet. Into that will go these T-nuts, and they just get tapped into place. And then through that, I'm going to use these nylon leveling guides. The hole is for the clearance on the bolt. There'll be 2 on each side of the cabinet and 2 on the pull-out step. Now I'm starting to work on the countertop, and these are the elements. A piece of high-density particle board as the substrate. I'm building up the edges with some 3-inch wide pieces to give it some thickness, and on the top we'll laminate this high-pressure laminate. Next I'm going to wrap the perimeter of the top with some hardwood. It can be any hardwood. I happen to have some cherry around the shop. The corners will be mitered, and it's glued and attached to the substrate with brads. In order to have the laminate stick both to the particle board and to the cherry band, it has to be absolutely flush. So I'll bring it even with the belt sander. With the shop well vented, I'm now applying contact cement to the back side of the laminate. A nice even coat. I just spread it out with a scrap of the laminate. And then I'll put some on the particle board. The particle board may take 2 coats because it'll soak it up so quickly. Well, I'd say this is ready to apply. When it's just tacky and it doesn't come off on your finger, it's all set. Now I've cut this piece way oversized because once this goes down, you will not be able to remove it. So I'll just stick it on the edge, roll it down, and then take my J-roller and start at the center and push out to the edges to remove any air bubbles. To trim the laminate, I'm going to use my router, and I've set up a flush cutting bit. The ball bearing is flush to the cutting edge. The bearing will ride up against the cherry, trimming the laminate flush. Now I've switched to a chamfering bit just to knock off that sharp edge. Now the reason that I like this edge detail, by having the laminate come over the hardwood trim, there's no seam where water can get in and ruin the countertop. I want to add some protective finish to the cabinet because there is going to be water around it. So a couple coats of a fast-drying gloss polyurethane with a light sanding in between should do the job. But while that polyurethane is drying, I thought I'd take the time to make a paper towel holder because I'm going to be using a lot of towels when I'm sharpening tools. So I've just taken a couple pieces of cherry and rounded over the edge. Now I'll smooth it at the drum sander. One of the brackets just gets a hole 3/8 of an inch deep. The other bracket will get a couple holes to create a slot into which I'll slide a dowel to hold the paper towels. I'll clean out the space in between with a chisel. Well, I'll tell you, these chisels sure do need a sharpening. The brackets get attached to the carcass with some screws, driven from the inside. Okay, let's see how that's going to fit. I have a 1-inch dowel for the rod. It's going to be great. Well, now we want to set our vise, so I have to drill some 3/8-inch holes to bolt that down. The vise that we've chosen for our station is a 6.5-inch machinist vise. And even though we don't do a lot of metalworking here in the shop, this is a good stout tool when you have to bend some pieces of metal. Okay, let's see how this station works. I wonder if I can remember all the steps. Now, first I have to grade the stone down to the 220 grit, which will grind a little bit faster. I think I'm going to really like this. A dedicated place to sharpen my tools. Okay, let's see how we did. Now, Jeff said that there was one acid test, and that was if we could cut a piece of paper. Not bad. Guess I did pretty good for the first time, and that sharpening station is going to come in real handy.